Hello again, everybody. As you know, every single year the NFL Network does its top 100 players list that's voted on by the players. Every year there's always a bunch of rage and anger over some individual slots, but this year in particular, because Patrick Mahomes was ranked 4th after everybody assumed he would be number 1. I know this isn't an original idea, but I figured, why don't I look at the top 10 of the 100 list and give my thoughts on whether I think players are slotted too high or too low. Full disclosure, I don't have any set criteria for this. This is just me giving what I feel is right. Without further ado, let's begin. Number 10, Max Crosby. Crosby, obviously, like everybody else on this list, had a great 2023 season. He had 14.5 sacks and was tied for the league lead in tackles for loss with Danielle Hunter. I don't know why, but for some reason, this just kind of feels a touch high. I would have put him top 15, maybe somewhere 12th or 13th, but top 10, I don't know. It might, again, it's all subjective and it seems a little bit weird, but it just seems like saying he's top 10 in the league overall. That might just be a smidge too high, so I'm going to move him down. Now, as you might have assumed, that's what the down arrow represents, moving down the list. I would put him, like I said, anywhere from 12, 13, anything. No offense to Carmelo, but I think he is a smudge too high here. Moving on to number 9, Travis Kelce, and I think the list and the placement is about right. I think that Kelce had his worst season statistically in a very long time in 2023 due to injuries and excessive premarital sex with Taylor Swift, but he still would have easily topped over 1,000 yards once again had he not missed a couple games. And he was also unbelievable in the playoffs, including the Super Bowl. And he and Mahomes, they have that magic together that you can't really teach. It just comes with time and chemistry. And really, I always say this, Kansas City Chiefs games don't truly begin until Mahomes starts looking for Travis Kelce. He's still one of the best players in the league, although he is getting up there in age, and I feel like this is a pretty good spot for him to land at. Number 8, TJ Watt. Now, TJ Watt being at number 8 seems a little bit too low to me. He led the league in sacks again last season with 19. He had an interception. He had 3 fumble recoveries with a fumble recovery touchdown. He led the league in quarterback hits. He was basically elite in every single category you could think of, and he has the track record that shows it's not a fluke, and it wasn't even his best season. He is a consistent producer. In each of his last 3 full seasons, he's led the league in sacks. So I think 8's a little bit too low. I would bump him up a few spots. But the argument for best defensive player in the league right now, I would think, is between him and Myles Garrett. More on him in a little bit. Number 7, you have Trent Williams. Now, it's always tough with offensive linemen because you kind of have to rely on people who solely focus on offensive linemen. There's not a lot of people out there that are sitting and grading every single rep that players take on the offensive line. And a lot of it might be reputation. But Trent Williams, for the longest time, specifically since he's gotten to the 49ers, has been an elite player and set the standard at the left tackle position. He's graded out elite basically every single year. He was at a stellar 89.9 grade last season, and he really is one of the most physically gifted tackles and offensive linemen in general that we've ever seen. His athleticism, size, strength, he has it all, and that's why someday he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. At the same time, I always feel like when push comes to shove offensive linemen, I don't really know if, again, he might be a smidge too high to me, because the one bugaboo with Trent Williams is that he's kind of liable to miss games every single year, and I think there are times where you kind of have to look at the value of the position, and I think his position and the value of his position or lack thereof, I'm not saying offensive linemen aren't valuable, but I would move him down a few spots. I would move him from 7 to somewhere like number 10. I think he still deserves to be in the top 10, but at the very fringe of it. Number 6, Chris Jones. If it wasn't for Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, I think, would be considered already a Hall of Famer, and he might be a Hall of Famer anyway, but Aaron Donald, who was one of the 2 or 3 best defensive linemen we've ever seen, played his position, kind of took some of the thunder away from him, but now Chris Jones, he's been a first-team All-Pro the last 2 years. He had 10.5 sacks last year, but he's playing at a defensive tackle position, not defensive end. He's a guy that he's just a constant disruptor, and now that Aaron Donald is retired, he takes over the spot of the best defensive tackle in the NFL, and when he is on his game, he is truly a dominant game wrecker, but I do not think he's better than TJ Watt, and I do not think he's better than Myles Garrett. He's not ahead of Myles Garrett on this list, but I still think that he would probably slide in as the 3rd or so best defensive player in the league right now. Maybe 4th if you wanted to say Micah Parsons, but he is a guy when he can be a little bit inconsistent sometimes, but there's a reason why the Chiefs signed him to a massive contract. It's because he is one of the best players in the league. I would push him down a few spots though, just my feeling. Number 5, Myles Garrett. Oh, how far we've come with Sir Myles from his raging helmet attack against Mason Rudolph in 20 2019. Myles Garrett is the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. He's been an All-Pro, first-team All-Pro in 3 of the last 4 seasons. He had 14 sacks last year, 30 quarterback hits, and as I said before, he was the Defensive Player of the Year. And we've always known that he had this type of ability. He was picked first overall in 2017 by the Browns, who then went winless. But even still, ever since his second season, he's truly been one of the best players in the league, and he just completely wrecks every game he's a part of. I think that he's the best defensive player in the league right now, just for my money. And he was a big reason why Cleveland's defense was the best defense, or one of the best defenses in the league last year. And I think number 5 is a pretty good spot. Number 4, Patrick Mahomes. Now this is the doozy. This was the big problem that really had everybody shitting their diapers on social media and beyond. And in a certain sense, in a certain respect, I can kind of understand this, because Mahomes' 2023 regular season, his numbers were still good, but they weren't Mahomesian. They weren't best player in the league type of numbers. So if you were strictly judging it just off of the 2023 regular season, I could kind of accept Mahomes being at number 4. However, at the same time, it's like, give me a fucking break. This is Patrick Mahomes we're talking about here, and I don't mean to ride his dick so much, but the guy won another Super Bowl. He won another Super Bowl MVP. His playoff numbers were great once again. Right now, he is the best player in the NFL. If you gave everybody the opportunity to pick any player in the league right now to start their team with, everybody's playing and picking Patrick Mahomes. There's not even really anything to think about. And that includes Ravens fans, and that includes Bills fans too. He is the main character. He is inevitable. And the guy won Super Bowl MVP. My only problem is that I feel like with this ranking is when people try to bump him up, they use the fact that he defeated, or his team defeated, the top 3 players on this list in the postseason. And I just want to say, stop that shit right now. I hated that shit when it was used to prop up Tom Brady for so many years. Oh, his team won and he beat so-and-so, even though these guys are both, he doesn't play defense. Mahomes didn't play defense, okay? And the Chiefs defense was elite last year. For the first time in his career, he actually had a great defense, and he won the Super Bowl. Wow. But even still, even then, Mahomes still had to come through in the clutch in the fourth quarter and overtime in the Super Bowl for the Chiefs to actually pull out the win. They're going for the first three-peat ever in NFL history. You know, he is the best. He's the best player in the league right now. His track record gives him the benefit of the doubt for one down year. Now, I will say, if he has another regular season like he did last year, where he's kind of middle of the pack and the Chiefs don't win the Super Bowl, then I could say, okay, maybe you might want to move him down a spot or two. But right now, fresh off of back-to-back Super Bowl MVPs, he won MVP in 2022. He's the guy. He is the guy. He should be ranked number 1 right now instead of being at number 4. Number 3, Christian McCaffrey. Strictly, again, this goes back just from a value standpoint. McCaffrey is the best running back in the league right now. He led the league in scrimmage yards. He led the league in receiving and rushing touchdowns combined with 21. He also led the league in touches. And obviously, the trade has worked out pretty well for him and the San Francisco 49ers after he had a couple injury-prone seasons with the Panthers, and people thought, well, they're just getting a washed-up running back who had one great year in 2019. But he has proven to be an all-around threat. He's a massive part of their offense. So really, I could see him being a top 5 player if you're not considering value for a position. I don't think if there was a draft, every player becoming a free agent, do I think he would be the 3rd player picked? Absolutely not. But if you're just looking strictly at how good a player is and what they bring to the table, McCaffrey's an all-around wizard, so I can understand him being number 3. But again, with Mahomes he's not better than Mahomes. You got to slot him down. You got to push him down the slot. So instead of number 3, I could say number 4. Number 2, Lamar Jackson. Now, Lamar Jackson is one of the most polarizing players in the league. He obviously was the reigning MVP last year, and he has put together a Hall of Fame caliber career in the regular season. But as we all know, the playoffs have been his big bugaboo. But just going off of 2023 and what happened, he obviously was one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Although, again, his season, he obviously had a very good season. He threw for nearly 3,700 yards, 24 touchdowns, had a passer rating of over 102. That was kind of bloated by a few huge games, but he also ran for over 800 yards, led the league in yards per carry again. The guy, he'll always make fun of his running ability, but his running ability is a big reason why the Ravens have been so lethal and have such a high winning percentage since he became their starter. But to say that he's the 2nd best player in the league, I think that's overrating him a little bit, and I am not one of those people that pretends like he can't throw, but I do think that he still isn't quite as consistent as a thrower as you might expect for a guy that's as decorated as he is. So I would move him down from the 2 spot. I would move him up a few spots, maybe to number 8 or something like that, not number 2, so he's a little bit too high. And finally, at number 1, we have the world's most famous woman respecter and condom user, Tyreek Hill. And I just made a video ranking the top 10 receivers in the league, and I had Tyreek Hill at number 1. And I can't really argue with him being number number one if Patrick Mahomes didn't exist, of course. So I would move Tyreek Hill down another slot. I would say Hill is probably the second best player in the league. Although there is one thing, though, if you want to tangibly look at something to criticize with Tyreek Hill, it's very odd, and it kind of actually makes Mahomes' argument for number one even stronger, is the fact that since the Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill, they've won back-to-back Super Bowls. And yet, at the same time, no receiver in the league creates more headaches for defenses and is probably more valuable than Tyreek Hill is. So you have the situation where the Chiefs lose one of the most valuable and best receivers ever, and then they win back-to-back Super Bowls largely off of the back of their quarterback. And last year, again, to be fair, the Chiefs had a very good defense, so I'm not going to say it was all Mahomes or anything like that, but that kind of shows you that as long as Mahomes is in Kansas City, Chiefs are going to be the big baddies. You know what I'm talking about? So really, Tyreek himself is evidence that Mahomes should probably be number one based off of what's happened. Now, that's kind of a bit of a macro level assessment of it. Obviously, if you ask people, would you like Tyreek Hill to be on your football team strictly for what he brings to the field, everybody would say yes, because he's one of the best receivers of all time and he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. But he's not the best player in the league, although he is one of the best players after Mahomes. So here is my revised top 10 list in general. I had Trent Williams at number 10, which is down from number 7. I had Travis Kelce at number 9, which is the same spot. I had Lamar Jackson. I moved him down to 8, all the way from number 2. I feel like that was a pretty good spot. I feel like he's one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the league, but not top 2. Chris Jones, I moved him a spot down at number 7 from number 6. TJ Watt, I moved him up from number 8. And then Myles Garrett is the same at number 5. So you had 3 elite defenders, defensive linemen right there in a row. I feel like that's a pretty good spot for all of them. Christian McCaffrey is down from number 3. Josh Allen, wasn't in the top 10. I moved him from number 12. Again, kind of similar to what Chris Jones was to Aaron Donald. I feel like that's what Josh Allen is to Mahomes. I feel like if Mahomes didn't exist, Allen would be considered probably the best player in the league. He is turnover prone, but he's a guy, he gives you so many touchdowns, 40 or plus touchdowns total passing and rushing every single year, and is just an absolute nightmare for defenses. Number 2 is Tyreek, as I said before, and obviously number 1 I gave to Mahomes, which was down, or up I should say, from being put at number 4. Guys who just missed the cut, you had Max Crosby, who was in the actual top 10, and then Fred Warner, who was number 11 on the list, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, a couple of Dallas Cowboys there, and they still can't get past the divisional round, which makes me laugh. But so that's my updated top 10 list for anybody who cares. But I would say overall that this list is yet more evidence that players' opinions don't mean shit, and that appealing to authority is a logical fallacy that you should not rely on when in debates on social media or elsewhere.